Mark Rogers TV and Bowl Play starts this Saturday, specifically with two of the better teams in Bowl Play early on. BYU and Utah going at it at the Royal Purple Las Vegas Bowl, and a number of angles to get to here with Mitch Harper from 1320 K-Fan. Mitch, it's good to see you. How you been?
Doing well. It's been a crazy football season for BYU and even Utah as well. So I'm excited to be on to preview this exciting matchup for one of the nation's nastiest rivalries. So I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. So let's jump right to that because there's three ways I could go right here. We got Bronco Mendenhall coaching his last game with BYU. We've got a motivation factor that's probably very unique to the bowl season. And we've got a couple pretty good football teams playing very early. So let's start there. For Utah, it's a team that was in the top 5 at one point in the season, seemingly had the Pac-12 South locked down. So motivation would normally be a factor in trying to determine their aggressiveness in this bowl game. Same thing for BYU at 9-3. So any type of disappointment on the BYU side in regards to motivation in the bowl slotting?
I mean, for BYU, they're thrilled to be in this game to face their rival Utah. They wanted the Vegas Bowl. It was either Vegas or Hawaii for BYU. They wanted the Vegas Bowl, one, because it's a Power 5 opponent they get to face, and also it's a higher payday for the people that receive those type of checks. So Vegas Bowl was where BYU wanted to go, and they're excited. For Utah, I think there's a little bit of disappointment in the fact that, we were talking about Utah as a team that potentially in the college football playoff discussion, and they had everything in front of them. Even in that UCLA game that they lost, the Rose Bowl was within their sights. They just had to beat UCLA, and they would have been heading to the Pac-12 championship to face Stanford in the Pac-12 title. So I think there's a little bit of disappointment, and also the fact that 9-3 for Utah in the Pac-12, one of the tougher leagues top to bottom, gets them sent to a bowl game they've played in last year in Vegas, and it's the 6th selection bowl in Vegas. But that's kind of the nature of how this business works. These are made for TV events. They're not based on just, you're the 6th best team. It's just, this is made for TV, and what better made for TV event than BYU versus rivalries that I think a lot of people might now get to see more on a national stage than ever before.
So yes, made for TV. That kind of brings me to the unique aspect of this bowl game. We've got 41 to watch, and this one's completely different than the others. When you're lining up two hated rivals in a bowl game, it's just kind of a unique setting and situation.
It really is.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And then on top of that, for BYU, this not so unique to college football. It seems like more and more coaches are getting hired and fired and moving on, and coaching changes all over the place, which not only affect the head coaching position, but coordinator and positional coach positions that get yanked from teams and programs. And so these kids may be getting used to chaos and change during that 4 to 6 week period at the end of the regular season. So for BYU, it's Bronco Mendenhall after 11 years moving on to Charlottesville, Virginia to coach the Cavaliers, but he's going to coach in the bowl game. What is BYU's perspective from a fan base perspective on him leaving? Doesn't necessarily seem like a step up, and he sticks around to coach the bowl game.
Yeah, it was kind of a shocking situation for Bronco to leave for Virginia. I think it was one that caught everyone off guard. There was talks last year that Bronco applied to go to Oregon State when that job opened up after Mike Riley left in Nebraska, because that was his alma mater. So there was some connection there. But Bronco always said if he was ever going to leave, it was a place that had a similar mission to BYU, or a school that had kind of restrictions in a sense like BYU, kind of a higher purpose, if you will. And he always mentioned places like Army or Navy as being examples of that. But Virginia, that just kind of didn't make sense at first. But when you kind of dig into it, it does make sense for a guy like Bronco, because Virginia does have restrictions in their own right with their high academic standards. But BYU fans were very surprised, and I was surprised myself to see it come out and to see how quick these events turn. But I think the reaction from BYU fans, I think right now, because we're 10 plus days into the coaching search now, I think there's a little bit of uncertainty about the future of BYU football. I think Bronco was a guy that a lot of people were starting to get a little bit lukewarm on terms of, they felt that he kind of maxed out or hit his ceiling. So I think there's a lot of people that are saying, it's probably best for both parties, both BYU and Bronco, to leave now and kind of part ways, because he only had 1 year left on his contract. But at the same time, the guy had a lot of success. He went to 11 straight bowl games, including this Las Vegas Bowl this Saturday. And, he kind of brought back a BYU program that when he took it over in 2005 had 3 straight losing seasons, and he brought him back to respectability. Now, he never had that special season like his rival Utah did, going to 2 BCS Bowls, like Boise did, like TCU did when they were in the Mount West. So that was tough for BYU, but at the same time, he had a lot of success in Provo, and he will be missed. But I think also BYU fans are excited about the possibilities that they could have with maybe Kalani Sitake, whoever ends up being the head coach at BYU.
Hey, Mitch, we've talked about this from a different angle in the past. I'll address it in regards to the schedule, where BYU is kind of a victim of the schedule or a beneficiary of the difficult schedule. So it's usually front-loaded because the difficult teams that they play, for the most part, go to play in their various Power 5 conferences. So Tanner Mangum and company kind of captured September with the back-to-back, the one Hail Mary, the one fourth down play against Boise State to pull that game out, 2 high-profile wins going to UCLA, almost pulling out that game, which may have really turned the season in regards to perception and perspective out there. So just your thoughts about the schedule and kind of running off the radar and an opportunity here to recapture that.
Yeah, I mean, the schedule was very difficult going into the season for BYU. It maybe wasn't as tough as maybe we originally thought. I don't think anyone envisioned Missouri being as bad as they were, and also teams like Cincinnati being 500 ball clubs. I don't think any of us saw that. But yeah, it was a tough competitive schedule, and it is front loaded. That's kind of the nature of what BYU has to deal with, being an independent, as you mentioned, and having everyone else, playing in league play in the month of November. But also, I think BYU likes that because they realize that they don't have the depth like a Power 5 school, so you have to play those teams in the top half of the schedule. So, as far as UCLA, BYU teams that put BYU on the national, and BYU was positioned to kind of be, maybe a New Year's Six team if they were to win out, but then they had that shutout loss to Michigan, and it kind of reset the season. It kind of BYU started from scratch. They reeled off a bunch of wins in the month of October, and Missouri was going to boycott, and there was a lot of uproar about that game even being played. And BYU went into that one and kind of just laid an egg, and it was one that kind of, I think, BYU being 9-3, it still feels like some fans are kind of wondering what could have been, because they had that close call against UCLA. The Michigan game, that is what it is. Michigan was playing great football at that time. But the Missouri one was inexcusable. To give up 20 points to Missouri, a team that could barely score at all, I just think that was a really bad loss. And it was one that kind of left BYU fans thinking, man, they were so close to getting 10 wins and getting off, getting that 10-win mark. But at the same time, BYU did exceed their win total from last season. Last year, they were at 8-5. This year, 9-3, and 10 wins is still within reach with this bowl game on Saturday.
Mitch Harper joins us from 1320 K-Fan. Mitch, I brought up that name, Tanner Mangum. He kind of carries the banner for the program right now. Freshman quarterback, remarkable story, steps off from the mission. He's a third stringer. He makes it through August camp. He is forced into the starting lineup, pulls off the Hail Mary against Nebraska, then the Boise State play on fourth down, plays really well in those games. For the entirety of the season, based on the stat sheet, pretty good at 21 and 7 touchdowns to picks, but basically defined by those 2 plays. How would you look at his overall play?
Oh, I think he's been fantastic. I mean, to be a true freshman, and yes, 22 years old, so it's not your typical true freshman as it always gets thrown around, but Tanner Mangum was fantastic. And to think, 6 months ago, he was serving an LDS mission, and now where he's at, leading a team, a D1 football team, 9-3, gets thrown into the fire. It's pretty remarkable stuff, and to go over 3,000 yards, really amazing. And Tanner, I think has a tremendous ceiling, and he's going to be someone that we look at as one of the best quarterbacks in college football in the next few years. He just has that potential, and he's someone too. What separates him from most quarterbacks, he loves the grind. He always says when it comes to football, he just loves that day in, day out grind that comes with this sport. And I think that's really what separates him apart. And he's someone that just takes in a playbook, and he learned it really fast and was able to take over that number 2 job, and then obviously get thrown in the fire and have success. So Mangum has a bright future ahead of him, and he's going to be someone that is that face of the franchise, if you will, for BYU moving forward.
Algernon Brown had a nice season rushing the football, 700 yards, 11 touchdowns. A couple seniors lead you in receiving. I noticed that 5 guys have over 30 catches, but it's Mitch Matthews with the big plays at 52 catches, 11 TDs. Devin Blackman, 43 receptions as well. They're both seniors. So can you set us up offensively in regards to obviously, it would be nice to see the seniors leave on a high note, but at the same time, you're looking down the road in some of these bowl games in regards to who's going to be those next guys to step in and make big plays.
Yeah, there's a lot of senior talent in that receiving group, but I think BYU feels that they got some guys in the wings they're going to be set up for success and be big time contributors in the program in the future. And one in particular who's been playing this season is actually one of those guys that's had over 30 junior wide receiver, but he hasn't had maybe the role that maybe some envisioned when he came to BYU from the JC ranks, had offers from LSU and USC, and picked BYU as a junior college transfer. And, Mitch Matthews has still been that number 1 wide receiver for BYU, but you talk next year, Nick Kurtz is expected to be that number 1 target, and you'll see him on Saturday against Utah. But also in the running game, Algernon Brown, as you mentioned, he's been a guy that's had a nose for the end zone, and he's only a junior. And this is a running back group that lost Jamal Williams before the season. He withdrew from school, and they've kind of been a patchwork running back group, but they're starting to hit their stride with Algie Brown, Francis Bernard, his backup. But then also they have a little bit of a wrinkle thrown into this week's game, a transfer from Washington State in Squally, Canada. Yeah, that's his name, Squally, Canada. He actually gets thrown into the mix. He's a talented transfer from Washington State who really a speed back and is expected to be a significant contributor in 2016. But he's going to play this week because he's already passed his 1-year calendar in terms of since he transferred from Wazoo to BYU. So it's exceeded 1 year. So he's eligible to play this week against Utah, and BYU is going to play him. BYU is going to have an aggressive game plan against the Utes because this is Bronco's last game. They're going to throw it all out there, and they're going to try and make it happen and get off the snide against the Utes, who they've lost 4 in a row to.
Okay, so when I work on my postseason all-name team in college football, maybe Squally Canada kicks somebody out of the starting lineup automatically, I think. Man, Mitch, you get this kid, Bronson Kafusi. He's all over the stat sheet, 17 tackles for loss, 11 sacks. He's playing his last game. You got to be a little bit more excited because of that situation, him leaving with Fred Warner, a sophomore, second on the team in tackles. He had a big year getting into the backfield as well. And Kai Nakua, who had 6 interceptions. Kind of highlight to the guys that we should need to look out for on defense for some folks out there that are going to see BYU for the only time this year.
Yeah, Bronson Kafusi has been a tremendous talent, and he's a 4-year starter at that defensive end spot. And going in to the season, he last year he was playing a little bit of outside linebacker, and his draft stock kind of dropped. He was projected early on in his career, paired alongside Ziggy Ansah, who's one of the leaders in the NFL in sacks currently. He was a freshman on the opposite end spot, and he was kind of projected as someone maybe that could be a high draft pick, but his draft stock kind of died down after last year playing the outside linebacker spot. This year, though, he's been tremendous, and it's a byproduct of the new strength and conditioning program that BYU's incorporated. And Kafusi's been a beneficiary of that, and he had a fantastic performance against Missouri, arguably his best one as a Cougar. And it was one that even led Brent Musburger in that broadcast to say, Bronson Kafusi is so good, he could even start at Alabama. Now, I don't know if he could start at Bama, but that's a whole different type of talent. But it just speaks to his abilities and his talent. And Kafusi is someone that you should be watching for on Saturday. And Fred Warner, talented outside linebacker. He's kind of in that same mold as the Kyle Van Noy. similar than Vanoy, of course, is with the Detroit Lions. He was a really talented player a few years back for BYU, so keep an eye on him. And then Kai Nakua. Kai Nakua, if you're familiar with that name, it's probably because of a bad thing. The Miami Beach Bowl last year, he was kind of in the middle of that big brawl that took place between BYU and Memphis. He threw the sucker punch, and that kind of, was something where, brought a little bit of public shame to him, but he's really bounced back, and he's been a leader of this defense, and he's led the team in interceptions this year and been close to setting the single season mark for interceptions for BYU for a player in one season. So he's had a great year, but those are definitely the three of the players that you need to be keeping an eye on. And I'd also throw in middle linebacker Harvey Longy as well. He's someone that can really get into that backfield and create a lot of pressure for BYU's defense.
Utah just doesn't lose bowl games. They're 7-1 under Kyle Whittingham, 11 of 12 coming into this bowl game. No Devontae Booker, though, and the offense runs through him primarily. Over 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, catches 37 out of the backfield. So a huge downgrade in rushing the football with Joe Williams, who's pretty capable. But still, when you look at Travis Wilson's numbers, he threw it less than 300 times in a full season. They don't rely on him too much, but they're probably going to in this game. I don't know if you've had a whole lot of time, Mitch, to prep Utah yet, but just your thoughts on the Utes at 9-3.
Oh yeah, Utah's a very talented team, and Joe Williams stepping in at running back. He is very capable. He was a transfer he originally was at UConn, went to JC ranks, and kind of got found about Utah because of Dennis Erickson. Knew Dennis Erickson through being the head coach at Miami, and ended up just going to Utah because of Erickson. So Joe Williams is a very capable back, but yeah, Devontae Booker, losing him is a huge blow to Utah, because not only was he someone that he was the offense in terms of the number of carries he was second at the time when he went down with his injury against Arizona. He was second in the country with most touches by any player in college football. So he just kind of speaks to how important he was to Utah's offense, but he just had that patience. He had that ability to just kind of quietly just find that hole, and he just wear down an opposing defense over the course of the game. Losing Devontae Booker has been huge, and you've seen the offense for Utah the last few games kind of reflect that, because against UCLA, against Colorado, the offense really sputtered. And Joe Williams, he's a speedier back. He's a lot quicker than Booker. He runs a 4.3 in the 4.340 is what he's been clocked in. He's one of the fastest guys on Utah's team, but still not near the talent of a Devontae Booker. Travis Wilson is going to have to be the guy that has to lead Utah offensively if they want to win this game. And Travis, his last game against BYU was in 2013. He had a really good game, went 24-32, one of his best games, I think, passing the football in his career at Utah. And I think he's been kind of a byproduct. He's been a 4-year starter for the Utes at that quarterback spot, but he's had so many different offensive coordinators, 4 offensive coordinators in 4 years. And I think he's just struggled with, not having that consistency, not having the confidence from his OCs for him to throw the football down the field, because he is capable. I mean, out of high school, Travis Wilson was an Elite 11 quarterback, so the accolades are there. I think it's just a byproduct of confidence at this point. And, let's see what he can do as a senior send-off in his last game playing as a collegiate player. But, yeah, he's capable, and he's had success. And the thing is, too, is Utah knows how to prepare for BYU. I mean, they've won 4 in a row. Kyle Whittingham, better than any other coach against Bronco Mendenhall, knows how to prepare for BYU. They've had tremendous success. Out of the both coaches came in at 2005, Kyle Whittingham and Bronco. They took over their schools in 2005, and they played 9 games. Whittingham's won 6 of the 9, and the 3 wins by Bronco and BYU have came down to last-second possessions. So, Utah is really, for about 60 minutes or 59 minutes of every single game, has pretty much outplayed BYU in every single contest since these 2 coaches took over. So it's going to be an interesting element there to see this kind of the final stand between Bronco versus Witt, and who can get the upper hand in Vegas.
Yeah, you got to credit Whittingham after being somewhat overwhelmed with their initial entry into the Pac-12. It hasn't taken them very long to catch up speed and become one of the better programs in that conference. And when I think of Utah football, I think of the sledgehammer at running back with Devontae Booker, which they don't have, and you set us up nicely in what to expect from Joe Williams. Travis Wilson, not relying on him to win the game, but they may need to do that in this scenario, as you mentioned as well. And then on defense, a defensive line that's always one of the better ones in the country. Gianni Paul is one of the better playmakers on the defensive side of the football in the Pac-12. He's got 12.5 tackles for loss. Marcus Williams at defensive back has 5 picks. So they're always stout defensively.
Yeah, they definitely are. And the thing is with Utah's defensive front, I mean, that's where they kind of built their name. I mean, going into the Pac-12 in 2011, they knew they could hang their hat on being physical in the trench. It just a matter of kind of filling the gaps in terms of depth and the skill positions and getting that talent that meets the level of Pac-12 standards. And they've started to grow that, especially at the starting spots. But they're a banged up group right now defensively. There's a lot of injuries on the defense side of the football for Utah, particularly in the secondary. I think that's where the biggest question mark is right now. For that front seven with Gianni Paul and Jared Norris, those guys are two of the better linebackers you're going to see out west and then arguably in college football. Gianni Paul, I think, probably should have been Defensive Player of the Year in the Pac-12 this season. They made a vow that this was going to be their special season. So they got to, I don't know if they envisioned the special season ending up in the Las Vegas Bowl, but they still got a chance to win 10 games. And one of the big things to watch for with Utah along that defensive front is Lolo Tulele, his status. He's the anchor in that middle of the defensive line. He didn't play in the fourth quarter against Colorado, so his status is kind of up in the air. Kyle Whittingham doesn't really divulge injury information much unless it's a season-ending injury. So his status is Lolo Tulele. If he's not there, I think that's kind of it could be something to keep an eye on for the Utes. But they do have a lot of depth in that defensive line where, again, that's been their strength for really decades, even dating back to the Ron McBride days. Utah's always hung their hat on really talented defensive fronts. So, I think that, the biggest thing with this game, when I look at both teams, because it's an evenly matched game, 14 of the last 21 years between BYU and Utah, 14 of the last 21 games, excuse me, it's resulted in an outcome either 7 points or less. So these two schools are very evenly matched. They're built this kind of similar. They try to hang their hat on winning the point of attack, but it really comes down to turnovers. When BYU loses to Utah the last under Bronco Mendenhall, they've been negative 21 in turnovers. When they've won, they've been positive 3. So I think that really kind of highlights, what's going to be the narrative. It's kind of cliche to say that, but turnovers are going to be matched.
Yeah, it's a unique bowl situation when we've got Utah and BYU, a couple 9-3 football teams playing very early in the bowl season, also moving the Holy War down to Vegas to get things settled down there in Las Vegas. So very interesting. Looking forward to this one. Mitch Harper from 1320 Key Fan joins us to really break down the situation from both sides. So, Mitch, we always appreciate the time.
Yeah, happy to be going to be in for a treat to see this this nasty rivalry on a national stage. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be down in Vegas, so make sure to give me a follow on Twitter at Mitch_Harper for all the latest between BYU and Utah.
There it is. Have a great trip, Mitch.
All right, thanks, man.